Hello and welcome to the director's commentary for Partners. We're going to be talking about some interesting things here, and like I always do with these directors, I'm going to be talking about the story and the production. Now I just want to say stay tuned for the end. There's a little bit of a bonus right at the end of this episode, so make sure you stay tuned to that. Now I just want to say this story, I've had it planned for a long time. And it actually, at one point, was a cancelled project. This almost never came out. I'm glad it's here, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, but it almost never happened. This was a cancelled project. The story over time has remained the same. Just a few little changes, such as dialogue tweaks, but nothing major. Now, I want to say this contains spoilers for Partners, so if you haven't watched Partners, I highly recommend you watch Partners before this commentary. So we're going to move forward now. This episode, timeline wise, takes place right in the middle of Dawn of Corruption Part 3. So in Dawn of Corruption Part 3, between the middle marker of the video, the episode, there's a time jump of several months. And in that time jump, this is where Partners sits. So in Dawn of Corruption Part 3, Bumblebee gets shot and injured, and there's a time jump where it jumps to Optimus and Ratchet going to the Arctic Circle and finding RC. Partners fits in between that time jump. So that's why it was a cancelled project, because I don't like to make a project where it's happening at the same time with another project. I like to make a project where it's, okay, this is a sequel, this is a prequel, this has happened in between these two stories. I like it like that. I like it to flow nicely, whereas this fits in the middle of another project, like happening at the same time, timeline wise. So there were two different projects happening simultaneously, and originally I wasn't a fan of that, but I decided that I had to make this because RC, if it's not clear in my story, RC suffers quite a lot. She suffers from mental health, and this is her backstory. I needed to tell it. It's necessary. RC struggles, and she struggles to cope, and she grieves. She does grieve quite a lot, and we'll find out in this episode why she grieves. Now, what I am going to talk about is the plot, the characters, production-wise, and anything miscellaneous. Okay, so we'll go through quite a few good pointers. Now, I just want to say that RC actually, a few times in this, she walks off camera and she sort of jumps around from here to there. That's generally just to show the passage of time, like not a long, massive amount of time, just a brief few seconds where she's in one area, then she goes to another area of the moon. So just want to address that if anyone's wondering. And another thing is, in this production, I actually did science lesson, so I looked at how dust sort of works on the moon. When astronauts are walking, where does the dust go? It sort of settles down, it sort of just disappears into the air somewhere, even though there's no air on the moon, but it just sort of disperses. So when RC's punching the ground, I wanted to know, how does the dust work? Does it just settle on the ground? Does it float in the air? What happens? How long does it stay in the air for? Or does it fall to the ground quite quickly? So I did quite a few science lessons just about those things, and also the US flag on the moon. So we do see that in this episode, and actually, from the research I did, the United States flag on the moon is 5 feet tall, and RC in Transformers Prime is around 15 feet tall. So that means that RC is 3 times the size of the flag on the moon. Now, I actually measured it up to RC, the flag, to try and get an accurate scale that is realistic of how big a flag would be against RC. So in editing, I actually do that. I look at the size comparison between RC and the flag and try and work it out. And you might also notice that the flag doesn't have any colour to it. Why doesn't it have any colour to it? Well, apparently that because of the UV rays from the sun, and with the flag being on the moon, the United States flag right now is sun damaged. So if you were to look at the flag now, it doesn't have any colour on it because it's all faded with the sun. So I actually made it so there was no colour in the flag, just so it was burnt and black and white. That's another little science lesson I did. And also you may be noticing that there is no sound effects in this. When there's an explosion, there are no sound effects. Why are there no sound effects? Well, that is because there is no sound in space or the moon. So with that, there is nothing for the sound to bounce off. So there's no need to have a sound effect to have RC walking around, kicking doors, punching the ground. There's no need for the knockouts engines to be roaring. There's no need for the explosion sound effects. Now you hear people talk about this sort of thing in films. Oh, in space sci-fi films, why are everyone screaming and shouting and everything? It's not scientifically accurate. And people say that they add sound effects because otherwise it would be boring just to have a silent movie. Which is true. In mine, I went for that realistic tone to see what it was like, and also to put emphasis on the story. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, RC and Tailgate, if you're wondering how they're actually talking, how we can hear them, they are talking through their internal comlink system, so they can hear each other. Now, what that does is taking away all the sound effects. It allows the audience to hear what the characters are saying and not boom, bang, machine gun noises, everything like that, okay? It allows the audience to actually hear the characters, hear what they're saying, connect with the characters, and also bring the soundtrack up just a notch so the audience can hear it better without all the sound effects going on, and really have that connection between the character, the audience, the soundtrack, have it all tied up nicely in a bow and get it somewhere where it's quite a simple thing visually and auditory, and it allows you to focus on the smaller details. One thing I actually want to say is RC and Tailgate in this story, although they're speaking English, technically they are actually speaking Cybertronian. Now let me explain that. Before Transformers come to Earth, they don't know English. And what happened in the Michael Bay movie comics, on the first comic, the movie prequel, it actually states all inner and outer dialogue is translated from Cybertronian. And that happened in my series. When we see characters on Cybertron and they're talking English, in canon, they are not. They're talking Cybertronian to each other. It's just I've translated it from English so the audience can tell what they're saying. And with that, it shows when they go to Earth, that's when they do start speaking English. One thing I love about this episode as well is the realistic tone it has to it. Not only with the sound and space, but everything's happy. And it just suddenly goes sad, suddenly goes somber. And I try and emulate life a little bit, like, into my series, where you can have something that's sad and then it all becomes okay, or vice versa. And this happens in this episode. And while we're on the tone of realistic, another thing that I actually did with the science is when RC's walking up the hill to Tailgate's ship, the reason why she's sort of walking in the way she is actually because of the gravity in space. She's sort of like bouncing around a little bit, walking a little slower than she normally does because of the gravity. So that's something, a little nice touch I added in there as well. And speaking of ships, so Knockout and Tailgate pretty much have the same sort of ship. In my series, characters use similar looking ships. So it's just a standard class size, or maybe there's different sizes, but they all sort of use the same model. It's just different colours and minor modifications to each, ship, depending on who pilots them. So there is normal Cybertronian ships, but there's also ships like this, a lot of standard class ships. Now, with that, it's sort of like cars here in the on Earth. People can have the same cars. They differ to each person because people can customize them differently. But in the end, it's although you might have a unique car, there's 1,000 more that around the world like it. It's the same with ships. So if you see the same sort of ship in my series, just know it's just a standard class ship. Now I just want to talk about Tailgate here a little bit. I just want to say that there's no way RC could have saved Tailgate. So what actually happened was Knockout sneakily stuck a bomb on Tailgate's ship. I know, surprise, surprise. How would Tailgate's ship have exploded if there weren't a bomb on it or something? Well, what had happened is Tailgate needed to repair his ship, so he landed on the moon, and while I'm on that point, Tailgate deliberately didn't park at the rendezvous point he set with RC, because he knew if he parked somewhere else, RC would have to walk a little bit further. So he just did that just to annoy RC. And thinking of that, if Tailgate did park closer to the rendezvous point, RC and RC's ship would have been caught in a blast. So it's a good thing that Tailgate parked far away, because he saved RC's life. If he parked at the actual rendezvous point, RC and Tailgate both dead, ships both destroyed, no one would ever know. So just putting that out there. Tailgate, you're a real hero. But there's no way RC would have been able to save Tailgate. He stuck a bomb on his ship, and Tailgate landed first on the moon. And because Tailgate needed to repair his ship, he was not actually... He wasn't really with it. He was focused on his ship. He wasn't looking out for Knockout. He wasn't looking out for any danger. He was distracted. So perfect opportunity for Knockout to come and put a bomb onto his ship. So for Knockout, there was a pre-planned murder. He premeditated killing Tailgate, which is quite dark. But the thing is, I want to address, Knockout didn't sabotage Tailgate's ship. Because Tailgate's ship needed repairs, that was just general maintenance. It wasn't anything that Knockout had damaged on the ship, so Tailgate had to land. It wasn't anything like that. It just happens his ship needed repairs and he had to land to repair it. But, Knockout is an intellectual coward, an opportunist. He saw this opportunity a mile off, and Knockout went ahead and did it. Now, with Tailgate, what I wanted to do was make a project where you never see the character. This is the first time I've ever done it, where you never, ever see the character. Because what I wanted to do was bond with Tailgate through his voice, through what you can hear. You can hear the sound effects of him working on his ship in the background. And the only reason why you can hear those sound effects is because Tailgate's in his ship. So there is walls for Tailgate's voice and his sound effects when he's repairing his ship and dropping his tools and screwing things in or doing stuff. There's room in his ship for those sounds to bounce off and hit his comm link, so RC can also hear what he's doing. But I wanted to make the audience bond with Tailgate just through his voice, not by showing him or anything like that, but just through his voice, through his personality. And the thing is with Tailgate, he's very he's got a lot of charisma, and he wasn't actually listening to RC. He was half working on his ship, half listening to RC. When he was listening to RC, he wasn't paying attention to fixing his ship, so he broke a wrench or he did something wrong with his ship, so then he went back to fixing his ship, and he wasn't really listening to RC. So that's what I wanted to do with Tailgate. And I actually have a direct commentary with D. Barry where I guide him on voicing Tailgate. So I'll leave that There's a link in the top right hand corner right now. Go check that out. So it's really an interesting thing where I coached D Barry, and we discussed Tailgate and what he's doing. So go check that out for more information. But I think one thing that I want to say is, are Tailgate and RC Conjux Endurers? Yes and no. So they are partners, maybe not in the romantic way, but they are partners in the sense of traveling together, doing things together, having each other's back, much like a police officer would be partnered with another police officer on a mission or on some task. That's their routine, day in, day out partner. That's what Tailgate and RC have together. That's where they're partners. But there would potentially be some sort of romance between the two. Maybe it's unspoken, but there is something there. And that's why RC is so distressed. That's why she suffers later on down the line mentally from grieving, because she's lost essentially the love of her life. And Tailgate's death, if you've been watching my videos from, almost the beginning, Tailgate's death was foreshadowed. So in Dawn of Corruption Part 3, in the final act, Cliffjumper actually talks to RC and says to her, "I know what happened before you came to Earth. Knockout, he may have killed Tailgate, but we'll avenge him. We will." That's what Cliffjumper says to RC. And RC is very snappy at Cliffjumper. She says, "I wouldn't go there if I were you." She's still grieving because in reality, RC loses Tailgate. She travels to Earth, had a mission or two with the Autobots, and Cliffjumper's in the timeline is already sort of asking about Tailgate. So RC is still very, very, it's only a day or two after this, Dawn of Corruption Part 3, the final act, where RC comes in. That's only a day or so after partners in the timeline, so it's quite personal for RC. And while we're on topic of RC, I want to welcome Star Penguin, the new voice actress for RC. Let's have a round of applause for Star Penguin. She did an outstanding job as RC. And it's quite sad because going back to the point that RC couldn't have saved Tailgate, the thing with Knockout is he's pretty evil. To say he's just a scientist and he's not a fighter, he's quite sick, because if you notice, Knockout flies away very slowly. He doesn't fly out at warp speed from the moon. He doesn't blow Tailgate's ship up and then "Oh, I gotta get out of here before RC kicks my ass." RC is so angry at Tailgate. She's fuming. She's desperate. That is why she's just rapid firing at Knockout's ship. She is so furious and desperate. But Knockout, originally, if you see my behind the scenes editing video, which again I'll leave in the right hand corner of this video, but originally Knockout was going to fly away from RC and the moon as quick as he could. He was just going out of there. And I thought, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. What if we had Knockout, which made it into the final cut? What happened if we had Knockout fly away from the moon slowly to annoy RC, to hover over her and think, "Yes, you see me, I see you, and I've got Tailgate." Knockout intentionally spares RC. If Knockout wanted, he could finish RC. RC's been flown back from the explosion. She's hurt. She's disoriented, which is why her shots miss. But she's disoriented. She's panicked. She's stressed. Knockout, if he wanted to, he could either land, finish RC, because Knockout's not really a fighter, but in RC's state, physically and mentally, Knockout could probably wipe the floor with RC right now. Or Knockout could just use his ship's weapons, his guns, and shoot at RC and kill her straight away. Ram into her, drop some bombs. Knockout very easily could kill RC. But he leaves her intentionally, as well as her ship. So RC gets her ship left intact. Knockout only destroys Tailgate's ship. Why is this? It's to provoke RC into retaliation. It's because Knockout wants to push RC to a breaking point. RC is left alive, so she can think, why couldn't it have been me? Save and spare Tailgate. Why was it me? You could have killed me. You could have left Tailgate alive. That's what RC's thinking, and that's what Knockout wants RC to think. And as I said, Knockout ship then flies away slowly, annoying RC that she has failed, and that she sees Knockout. Previously, she mentioned to Tailgate Knockout was in the area, and RC didn't take precautions. She didn't take the necessary precautions. She didn't tell Tailgate, oh, you better check your ship. She didn't check her own ship. She didn't scan the rest of the area. She just assumed we've given each other the slip and gave up looking for Knockout. This is going to plague her for the rest of her life. What if she did better? What if she told Tailgate before he landed, just keep an eye out for Knockout, instead of telling him while she was on the ground when the bomb was already planted? What if things went differently? That's what Knockout wants RC to think. That's why he flies away slowly, so he knows that she's seen him and these thoughts are running around in her mind. That is why RC suffers so much. And ultimately it ties it back to RC thinking, you should have killed me, not Tailgate. And while we're on that, if the situations were reversed, I actually want to say that it would have been the same. Let's say if RC died and Tailgate, if Tailgate was the one who was spared, Tailgate would have the same. It would just be flipped. Tailgate would think, why couldn't you have killed me? You could have left RC alive. It's the same thing. They both feel the same way towards each other. So it's going to be the same no matter which one died. But the thing with Knockout and a lot of villains in my series, they make things personal, not professional. There are going to be times when it's a professional killing where, Megatron is fighting a war and Decepticons are killing Autobots or vice versa. That is not professional, but it's not personal. It's just business almost. But with my villains and Knockout in this episode, they make it personal. Because the thing is, and I want to make this really clear, Knockout didn't have to kill Tailgate, but he did. Knockout, when he saw RC, as mentioned in this episode, RC says that she saw Knockout. That timeline-wise, she saw Knockout before this episode actually started, but she mentions to Tailgate that she's seen Knockout, and that they give each other a slip. Now the thing is, Knockout could have flown away. As soon as he saw RC, he could have gone the other way and thought, screw this, I'm out. He would have fly the other way, in the other direction. Or just carried his journey onto Earth. But he didn't. Knockout made it personal. He intentionally landed on the moon. He intentionally made his way over to Tailgate's ship. He intentionally planted a bomb on Tailgate's ship. He made it personal. Not business or professional. He made it personal. And also when writing a story like this, I think it makes the audience have more sympathy and empathy for the victim, in this case Tailgate and RC. And it makes you hate the villain, Knockout in this case, it makes you hate them more. Now, when this episode gets concluded in Dawn of Corruption Part 3, because there's no sequel to this, it's already done, Dawn of Corruption Part 3, in the final act. It's it's already wrapped up, this story. This is just a story that, as I mentioned, it fits in the middle of Dawn of Crumpshire Part 3 in the time jump. But RC, after this, she makes her way to Earth in her own ship. And the thing is, we actually zoom in the credits to the location where RC and Knockout go. We zoom into the Arctic Circle. So, we zoom into the Arctic. This is where RC and Knockout both land in Dawn of Crumpshire Part 3. That's how they get to Earth. Now, I'm not going to say for sure how they get there, which one gets first. I mean, how they get there, they travel by ship. But I'm not going to say if they chase each other. RC could chase Knockout and they could crash in the Arctic. Or, the other way around, Knockout could chase RC and crash in the Arctic. But somehow, from the moon to Earth, they both end up in the Arctic. Their ships are off screen, so we don't know where they are. So I never say in canon if RC and Knockout, if they crash their ship and it's beyond repair, because in the story, we never hear anything about Knockout's ship. We never hear anything about RC's ship. If their ships are intact, they could just fly away from Earth if they really wanted to, but they stay on Earth and we never hear anything about their ships. So, I'm not going to say this for sure, but it's likely that once RC and Knockout got to Earth, they crashed their ship into the Arctic. And then they got out, walked around, found each other and started fighting, and then that's when Optimus Prime and Ratchet ground bridge to the Arctic, find RC and take her back to base. And then Starscream finds Knockout in the Arctic and they team up to take down Megatron and create the Predacons. And that leads into the follow-on stories and End of Days. And with RC following Knockout to Earth, she could immediately get in her ship and fly to Earth, or it might take her 30 minutes, it could take her a couple of hours to actually get off her feet, process what's happened, and then she goes to Earth. I've not stated that time frame or anything, but I just thought I'd mention that. And with this story, it's actually inspired by Transformers Prime. If any of you have watched Transformers Prime, you know that Tailgate was killed. Tailgate was RC's partner, he got killed, and then RC had a new partner called Cliffjumper who got killed, and then she had Jack who got in danger more times than I can count. But plot armor kept Jack alive. But in this episode we don't have plot armor. Tailgate dies and it was inspired by Transformers Prime. But I wanted to do my own spin on it and have Tailgate on the moon. And it's sort of incited that Tailgate almost became a part of the Earth Wars team. Tailgate could have joined Optimus. He could have spoken with everyone on Earth. Bumblebee, Wheeljack, Cliffjumper, Roadbuster, the Wreckers. Oh, speaking of the Wreckers, Tailgate could have got to Earth and had an argument with Roadbuster or Topspin or whoever he bought that wrench off. But we missed that because Tailgate's dead, and who have you got to blame? Not me for writing the episode. You've got Knockout to blame. And just as I wrap this commentary up, I actually want to talk about Knockout a little bit here. So this episode was filmed a while back actually, but because of technical issues with my computer, I could never really edit it, and I was working on other stuff that also took a long time. But when I filmed this, obviously I used the Transformers Prime Robots in Disguise Deluxe Knockout as Knockout. I didn't have any other Knockout figure, so for Knockout Cybertronian mode, I had to use the same figure as his Earth mode, which I weren't happy with. But that was because I filmed it a little while ago. I had no choice. However, the Legacy Knockout came out recently, and what you're watching now is an original version of what would have been Partners. The exact same episode, apart from Knockout right at the end. If you see, when we are in Knockout's ship going to Earth, as all of his computer screens disappear, we actually see a reflection of Knockout in the glass of his ship as the sort of moon and the sunlight sort of get the right angle on the shot, and it reflects Knockout's face, so we actually see him. Originally, that was, as you see in this video, the original version of the episode. That was the Transformers Prime Robots in Disguise Knockout figure. But because Legacy's come out, I actually decided last minute, you know what, let's change it to Legacy, let's have him have a Cybertronian mode. Because originally what I was going to do was have Knockout the same, and because he's so stylish, somehow when Knockout goes to Earth and scans his new mode, his Earth mode, he somehow manages to be the only Cybertronian who manages to keep his original appearance when scanning a new mode. But I decided that was a bit far-fetched and not good for the story, and I decided to give Knockout a Cybertronian mode instead, which was his Legacy. So that's why we see in the final cut version on my channel that we see the Legacy Deluxe Class Knockout as his Cybertronian face. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. But with Knockout, he actually had a line. He only had one line, but he actually had a line right at the end that I'll play for you right now.
Come, RC. Follow me so that I may also dispose of you. You may be following a signal, but I'm following one of my own. Come, RC. Follow me so that I may also dispose of you. You may be following a signal, but I am following one of my own. Come, RC. Follow me so that I may also dispose of you. You may be following a signal, but I am following one of my own.
Now, there was a couple of reasons why I decided to cut this line out. Even when I wrote this into the script, I thought the line was a little bit cheesy. The delivery by TFA 2024 was perfect, exactly what I wanted. But even when I wrote the script, I thought, do I need the line? It just doesn't sound... It sounds like something Knockout would say to himself, but it just doesn't feel right. And again, TFA, if you're hearing this, you did an outstanding job as always with Knockout. It was just, I wasn't keen on how I wrote the line, and I didn't feel like it fitted. So I removed it for that reason, and also because I felt like it took away from the tone of the film. Because if you just see Knockout's face smiling in the glass reflection, and you see his sort of evil eyes, a picture paints 1,000 words rather than just a bit of dialogue. So I thought if the audience see Knockout's face, they're going to be like, screw you, Knockout. I thought the line would take away visually if I added that in. But what does Knockout mean when he actually says, I'm following a signal of my own? Well, I'm not going to say where, but maybe there was a signal sent out by someone, not Optimus Prime, but maybe somewhere in a project that hasn't been made yet, there is a signal sent out that Knockout is also following, and obviously he's a Decepticon, so we can sort of guess maybe where that came from. So Knockout is following his own, and we can see on his tracking systems and his screens, he's looking at Earth and you know the countries and everything like that. He's trying to find out exactly, you know, he's pinpointed the planet of where this signal came from, but whereabouts was it? So that's what Knockout is doing. Now I just want to say, as we wrap this up, I actually did as I said, the behind the scenes editing of this, and I deliberately show in that video certain things when I'm failing at the editing in the shots, when I'm, you know, tweaking things that might have not made it into the final cut, or maybe I did a different version of it. That's just because I wanted to show you all the different ways you can do things. You know, you can try a certain shot a certain way, lots, you know, for hours, but it might not end well, and you have to have workarounds sometimes. So that first shot, I had all separate pieces of like mountains and hills for the moon, and I was rotating from Earth to the surface of the moon, and it just wasn't working. I was trying to keyframe everything, it didn't work. What I ended up doing was screenshotting the entire picture of the moon and just rotating the screenshot of the moon surface rather than rotating every single bit of mountainside, moon surface, everything like that. So I just wanted to include that just to show that, just because you think you can do something a certain way doesn't mean you have to. You can find workarounds and easier ways sometimes to do things. Sometimes simpler is better. And as for the soundtrack, there was a few soundtracks that I thought, oh, that sounds really good for this episode. And then I decided not to use them, and I used like 7 different songs in this. It doesn't seem like it, but I used around 7 soundtracks in this episode. And, I use some of the, production sounds create, they're really good, and some copyright-free, royalty-free songs on YouTube. Just want to say the YouTube audio library is really good for non-copyright and making your videos monetized. So definitely check out the audio library on YouTube. But when you've got the right soundtrack, there's something inside where you listen to certain soundtracks and think, wow, this would work. That would be pretty cool. And sometimes you put it on the project and listen to it as the footage plays and you think, no, it doesn't fit, doesn't seem right. But I want to tell you, if you haven't found the soundtrack, if you're making a project and you haven't found the perfect soundtrack for your film, don't worry, don't rush it, don't just pick a soundtrack at random. Soundtracks will come. You will know when you record a video, when you've made it and you're looking for the soundtrack, you will know when you've got the right soundtrack. I have a gut feeling when I have a soundtrack that I like. There's something inside me that says this is the right one to use. And same goes for the wrong soundtrack. Sometimes, almost instantly, you put a soundtrack on and think this doesn't work. I might have listened to 10 seconds of it, but it doesn't work. Go to the soundtracks where your gut says this is the right soundtrack. Let that soundtrack deliver what you want the message to be delivered to the audience. Let it change the tone of the scene as needed, because music can really, really make a difference. It can make a scene go from happy to sad, even if the dialogue being spoken is the same. So really take time in finding your soundtrack and know that the right soundtrack will appear at the right moment for you. But that's all I've got in this director's commentary. I spoke a lot longer than I wanted to. But I hope I have spoken in, good detail, great detail of the characters, the plot, the editing, everything like that. And again, if you haven't seen Partners, I had a spoiler warning at the start, but please check the video out, even if you've already checked it out. Share it with friends, family, other Transformer fans, because it really helps sharing with other fans and really gets me motivated to make more videos. So I'm going to leave it there, but thank you very much if you stayed all the way through this video. And I hope you have an amazing day. So please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, follow me on Instagram at TFM5000. Also, follow Derek as well. He is amazing, and Star Penguin, amazing. Thank you so much to both of you. Really appreciate you both helping me out with this project. And thank you to TFA as well. Really appreciate you all. Other than that, I have a Discord as well, which is linked in the description box below. Feel free to check that out. And that's all I've got to say. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Until all are one.